Welcome to Longdo Dictionary AI Deep Dive, where we kind of take words you thought you knew, and we dive a little deeper. Today, we're tackling a word that might sound familiar to our listeners in Thailand, especially during rainy season.
Right.
Sandbagging.
Yes, we all know those sandbags holding back floodwaters. But what's interesting is how this word, so literal in its origins, has evolved to describe something much more subtle, even a bit sneaky.
Okay.
And for our non-native English-speaking listeners, we'll be sure to break down these nuances as we go.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We'll start, of course, with those literal sandbags.
Sure.
Our article reminds us how crucial they are in Thailand, especially during monsoon season, for protecting homes and businesses.
Right.
It's an image of defense, of holding something back.
And that idea of defense is key to understanding the word's journey.
Okay.
You see, even when we look at earlier uses of sandbagging, it was about protection, but in a more aggressive way.
Wait, really? How so?
Believe it or not, sandbags themselves were once used as weapons.
Wow, I had no idea. I always picture them just stacked up peacefully.
Right. But imagine a time before guns, even before swords were common.
Right.
A simple, heavy sandbag would have been a powerful weapon, especially in close quarters.
That completely changes my perspective.
Yeah.
So we've gone from defense to offense, but still within the realm of physical force, right?
Exactly. But the evolution doesn't stop there.
Okay.
Sandbagging then broadened to encompass any forceful or violent action, even without an actual sandbag.
So, like, if someone was being really aggressive, you might say they were sandbagging their opponent.
Yes.
Even if no sandbags were involved.
Precisely. It became less about the literal object and more about the impact, the forcefulness of an action.
And this is where it starts to get really interesting for language lovers, right?
Yeah.
Because the word takes on more metaphorical meanings.
You got it. It's fascinating how sandbagging expanded to encompass any kind of harsh or cruel treatment going beyond just physical force.
Wow.
It could be verbal, emotional, even psychological pressure.
So it's about any kind of pressure or force, even if it's not physical.
Exactly. Think about someone publicly humiliating another person or using intimidation tactics to get their way.
Yeah.
Those actions, while not physically violent, still carry a sense of force and aggression.
Right.
For our non-native English speakers, it's important to know that this kind of sandbagging is often about manipulation and control, using words or emotions as weapons.
So using guilt to get someone to do something they don't want to do would be a form of sandbagging.
That's a perfect example. It's about applying pressure, whether physical or emotional, to get what you want.
So we've gone from literal sandbags to this broader idea of forceful or cruel actions, even emotional pressure.
Yeah.
But the journey doesn't end there, does it?
Not at all. This is where sandbagging takes a turn towards something even more strategic, and let's face it, a little bit sneaky.
Okay, so tell us, how did we get to the modern meaning of sandbagging?
Right.
How did it become about deception and gaining a competitive advantage?
It's a fascinating evolution. Today's sandbagging is less about overt pressure and more about covert manipulation.
Okay.
It's about deliberately downplaying your own abilities or chances of success, often to lull your competitors into a false sense of security.
So you're pretending to be worse than you are.
Yeah.
Like if I pretended to be terrible at bowling, but then secretly bowled a strike.
Exactly. You're creating an illusion of weakness so that your opponent doesn't see you as a threat. And this tactic can be incredibly effective in competitive situations.
Right.
Think of it like a surprise attack, but instead of physical force, you're using deception to gain the upper hand.
Our article gives some interesting examples of this.
Yeah.
I love the one about the sales manager. Something I think a lot of people can relate to, even if you're not in sales.
Right. Imagine you're that sales manager and you know you're going to have a fantastic month. You've got this killer product, a great team, and the deals are flowing. But instead of sharing your true projections with your boss, you give them a much lower estimate.
So you're underselling your potential on purpose.
Precisely. You're setting the bar low so that when you inevitably exceed expectations, you look like a superstar.
That's pretty clever, but it also seems a bit, well, devious.
Yeah.
Is that what makes sandbagging in this context a negative thing?
You've hit the nail on the head. While it can be an effective strategy, sandbagging often carries negative connotations because it's seen as dishonest and manipulative.
So there's a fine line between being strategic and being a sandbagger.
Absolutely. And that's where things get really interesting, because while no one wants to be called a sandbagger, the line between clever strategy and deliberate deception can be blurry.
It seems like it all comes down to intent.
Exactly. And that's something our non-native English-speaking listeners should keep in mind. In English, we often talk about the importance of reading between the lines to understand someone's true intentions. With sandbagging, it's all about figuring out if someone is genuinely underestimating themselves or if they're trying to pull a fast one.
So how can we tell the difference? The article also mentions under-promising and over-delivering, which sounds similar.
Right.
How does that tie into all of this?
That's a great question. Under-promising and over-delivering is often seen as a more palatable form of managing expectations because the emphasis is on exceeding expectations rather than actively deceiving others about your abilities.
Okay, so it's like the difference between genuinely exceeding expectations and intentionally setting the bar low just to look good when you clear it.
Exactly. It all comes back to intent. Are you genuinely trying to manage expectations and deliver exceptional results? Or are you trying to gain an unfair advantage by misleading people?
So in the case of our sales manager, if she genuinely underestimated her team's performance, that's one thing. But if she intentionally lowballed her projections just to impress her boss, that feels a lot more like sandbagging.
You got it. And this distinction between managing expectations strategically versus manipulatively is something to be aware of in various aspects of life, not just in a competitive business setting.
That's a great point. Our article focuses on examples from sports, like the tennis player pretending to be injured. But this idea of sandbagging feels relevant to so many areas of life. Have you ever been in a situation where you suspected someone was sandbagging you?
Oh, absolutely. I think we've all probably experienced it in one form or another, whether it's a coworker downplaying their role in a successful project or that friend who pretends to be helpless to get out of doing the dishes.
And, it could be especially hurtful when you feel like someone's sandbagging you in a personal relationship.
Absolutely. It's one thing if it's a harmless game, but when it impacts our trust in someone,
right,
that's when it becomes problematic.
So we've gone from literal sandbags holding back floodwaters to this nuanced idea of strategically downplaying your abilities. It's incredible how one word can hold so much history and have so many layers of meaning.
And I think what we can take away from this deep dive is that language is fluid, constantly evolving alongside how we interact with each other.
Right.
Sandbagging, with its long and winding history, shows us that even everyday words can have hidden depths and ethical dilemmas attached to them.
It's a good reminder to be mindful of these tactics, both in how others might use them and in our own behavior. Because let's be honest, no one wants to be on the receiving end of a well-placed sandbag.
Indeed. And I think it also challenges us to consider, when does strategic thinking cross the line into manipulation? Is gaining an advantage, however clever, worth compromising our integrity?
Those are some thought-provoking questions to ponder. Maybe next time you see a sandbag, whether it's for flood control or just sitting in a gym, you'll think twice about its surprising journey through the world of language. Thanks for joining us for this Longdo Dictionary AI deep dive. Until next time.